Have you ever wondered what you would do if you overheard a murder plot? Would you risk everything, your safety, your peace, your very life, to save a complete stranger? This is the story of Sierra Howard, an ordinary woman with an extraordinary heart, who stood between a billionaire and his grave. But more than that, it's a story about the kind of love that redeems, the kind of courage that defies logic, and the haunting truth that sometimes the people we save come with shadows we never expected. What Sierra didn't know that fateful night in the hospital was that her act of heroism would bind her to Chad Donovan forever in ways both beautiful and terrifying. If you believe in love that conquers all, in courage that rises when it matters most, then this story is for you. Subscribe and share it with someone who needs to believe in the extraordinary power of the human heart. The air in the private wing of Mercy General Hospital carried the antiseptic scent of privilege, the kind of sterile cleanliness that only money could buy. It was 2:47 a.m. when Sierra Howard's life intersected with fate. She couldn't sleep. The minor surgery on her appendix had left her restless, and the pain medication made her head feel like it was stuffed with cotton. She'd been pacing her modest private room, a luxury she'd saved 6 months to afford, when she heard voices drifting through the ventilation system. At first, she ignored them. Hospital conversations were white noise, meaningless mumblings of strangers' lives. But then she heard a name that made her freeze mid-step. Chad Donovan. Everyone knew that name. The 29-year-old tech billionaire had been splashed across every news outlet for the past week. The golden boy of Silicon Valley, worth $4.2 billion, had collapsed during a charity gala. The media called it a mystery illness. Speculation ranged from stroke to poisoning, but his family had released only vague statements about his stable but critical condition. Sierra's room was apparently adjacent to his wing, separated only by a shared air duct. The voices were clearer now, echoing through the ventilation with eerie precision. "It's the simplest way, Damon." The voice was clinical, detached. "The compound I've been administering mimics a progressive coma. His brain activity is already minimal. In another 72 hours, we can declare him brain dead." Sierra's blood ran cold, her hand pressed against the wall as if she could somehow see through it. "And no one will question it?" Another voice, smoother, younger, but edged with something dark. "No autopsy, no investigation? Why would they?" The first voice, the doctor, Sierra realized, sounded almost amused. "He's been declining for days. It's a tragic, natural progression of an unknown illness. I'll sign the death certificate myself. The family has already agreed to a quick private burial." "How quick?" 72 hours after declaration. Quick enough that the board can't mobilize. By the time anyone thinks to question anything, you'll have full control of Donovan Enterprises. The will is ironclad. Everything goes to the surviving brother." A pause. Then the younger voice, thick with something between triumph and guilt. "He never should have had it all, Hayes. I'm the older brother, I deserve this." "Of course you do, Damon." Sierra's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They were going to kill him. No. They were already killing him, slowly, deliberately, and then they would bury him, conscious or not, while he was technically still alive. The voices faded as the men moved away, but Sierra couldn't move. Her entire body trembled. She was a middle-class accountant from Atlanta, a woman who balanced spreadsheets and went to yoga on Wednesdays. She wasn't equipped for this. She wasn't a hero, but she was the only one who knew. Sierra didn't sleep that night. As dawn broke through her hospital window, she made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't go to the police, not yet. She had no proof, just the overheard conversation of a woman doped up on pain medication. They'd dismiss her as confused, attention-seeking, or worse. She needed evidence. She needed help, and she needed to know exactly who she was trying to save. Using her phone, Sierra began to research. Chad Donovan stared back at her from a dozen news articles, impossibly handsome, with steel gray eyes and a smile that had launched 1,000 magazine covers. But as she dug deeper past the tabloid coverage of his dating life and philanthropic galas, she found something else. Chad Donovan wasn't just a billionaire playboy. He'd started coding at 12, built his first company at 19, and sold it for $200 million before he could legally drink. But he'd taken that money and poured it into Donovan Enterprises, a tech conglomerate focused on sustainable energy and accessible internet for developing nations. He'd made his billions by trying to change the world. She found interviews where he spoke about his older brother Damon with obvious affection. Damon taught me everything about business, Chad had said in a profile piece just last year. He's the pragmatist to my dreamer. I trust him with my life. Sierra's heart ached. Chad had no idea his trust was misplaced, but knowing why wasn't enough. She needed someone with power, someone close to Chad who could act. She scrolled through dozens of articles until she found what she was looking for, a photo from a charity event 6 months ago. Chad Donovan standing beside an older black man in an immaculate suit, both of them laughing. The caption read, Chad Donovan with longtime friend and legal counsel Marcus Harrington. Marcus Harrington. Sierra typed the name with shaking fingers. What she found made her sit up straighter. Harrington wasn't just Chad's attorney, he was practically family. He'd been Chad's father's best friend and had mentored both Donovan boys since childhood. More importantly, he was a founding partner at Harrington Associates, one of the most powerful law firms in San Francisco, with a reputation for taking on impossible cases. If anyone would believe her, if anyone would help, it would be him. Sierra checked herself out of the hospital that afternoon against medical advice. Her incision ached with every step, but she pushed through it. She had 72 hours. Maybe less. Harrington Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. Sierra stood on the sidewalk, staring up at it, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, she wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, and she probably still smelled faintly of hospital. She didn't belong here, but Chad Donovan didn't belong in a grave either. Sierra walked through the marble lobby and approached the reception desk. The woman behind it, perfectly coiffed with a smile as polished as the floors, looked up with the kind of professional courtesy that barely masked contempt. Can I help you? I need to see Marcus Harrington. It's about Chad Donovan, the smile tightened. Mr. Harrington doesn't take walk-ins. If you'd like to make an appointment, Chad Donovan is being murdered. Sierra's voice came out louder than she intended, echoing across the lobby. Several people turned to stare. I have information about a plot to kill him, and if Mr. Harrington doesn't see me in the next 5 minutes, Chad will die, so please, her voice cracked. Please just tell him that. The receptionist's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. She picked up the phone, murmured something Sierra couldn't hear, then looked up with wide eyes. 6th floor, he'll see you now. Marcus Harrington was in his mid-60s, with silver hair, warm brown skin, and the kind of steady presence that made Sierra understand why Chad trusted him. His office overlooked the bay, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the water like a painting. But he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at Sierra with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and scrutinized. Tell me everything, he said simply. So she did. Every word of that overheard conversation, every detail she could remember. When she finished, her throat was raw and her hands were shaking. Harrington was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to his window, and spoke without turning around. 3 days ago, Chad changed his will. He was supposed to meet with me to discuss it, but he collapsed before we could finalize everything. He turned back to face her. Damon was furious about the proposed changes. Chad was planning to restructure the company, dilute Damon's shares, and establish an independent board. He'd been suspicious of his brother's decisions for months. So Damon knew he was about to lose everything, Sierra whispered, and decided to take it by force. Harrington's jaw tightened. The doctor, Hayes, I know him. He's been the Donovan family physician for 15 years. I never would have suspected. He trailed off, then refocused on Sierra with laser precision. Can you testify to what you heard? Yes, but will anyone believe me? They will when I'm standing beside you. He pressed a button on his desk. Linda, get me Paul Chen in toxicology at Stanford Medical. Tell him it's urgent, code red. Then get me Judge Morrison. I need an emergency court order for an independent medical evaluation of Chad Donovan. He looked back at Sierra. You just saved a man's life, Ms. Howard, but we're going to need to move fast. If Damon suspects we know, he might accelerate his timeline. The next 3 days were a blur of legal maneuvers and mounting tension. Harrington moved like a man possessed. He obtained a court order within 12 hours, forcing the hospital to allow an independent doctor to examine Chad. Dr. Paul Chen, A toxicologist Harrington had known for 30 years found exactly what Sierra had described: a rare paralytic compound slowly accumulating in Chad's system. "It's brilliant, in a horrific way," Dr. Chen explained. "The compound suppresses neural activity without triggering standard toxicology screens. It mimics brain death perfectly. In another 48 hours, Chad's brain activity would be undetectable." "Can you reverse it?" Harrington demanded. "I can synthesize an antidote, but I'll need 72 hours minimum." "We might not have 72 hours. Dr. Chen looked at Harrington with grim determination. "Then I'll work faster." Sierra watched all of this unfold from a safe corporate apartment, feeling simultaneously essential and invisible. Harrington kept her updated, treating her like an equal despite the vast difference in their worlds. On the third day, Dr. Chen completed the antidote. It sat in a small vial in Harrington's office, safe, innocuous, and powerful. "We need to move tonight," Harrington said. "I have it on good authority that Dr. Hayes is planning to declare Chad brain dead tomorrow morning. Damon has already scheduled the funeral for tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow?" Sierra felt panic rising in her chest. "That's insanely fast. That's the point. Quick burial, minimal publicity, no time for anyone to question it." Harrington stopped pacing and looked at her. "We're going to stop them, Ms. Howard, but I need you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly." The Donovan family mausoleum sat on a windswept hill overlooking the Pacific, all white marble and old money. Black cars lined the private road, and mourners in designer funeral wear clustered under a large white tent. News helicopters circled overhead. Sierra sat in Harrington's town car, watching it unfold, and felt like she was about to jump off a cliff. "You don't have to do this," Harrington said. "I can testify to everything you told me." "No." Sierra's voice was firm. "Hiding now has no meaning. I have to do this." Harrington smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "Chad is lucky you were in that hospital." They watched as the ceremony began. A priest in ceremonial robes stood at the head of an ornate mahogany casket. Damon stood front and center, his face a perfect mask of grief, pale, composed, with just a hint of tears glinting in his gray eyes. "The antidote?" Sierra asked quietly. Harrington patted his jacket pocket. "Dr. Chen is standing by with a full medical team. The moment we open that casket, we administer it." The priest began the final blessing. In moments, they would lower the casket into the crypt. "Now," Harrington said. The sound of Sierra's heels on the gravel pathway seemed impossibly loud. Every step felt like moving through water. The mourners heard them coming. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and a ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Damon saw them first. His face went through a remarkable transformation: shock, then rage, then that carefully constructed grief settling back into place. "Marcus," he said, "I almost thought you weren't coming to your favorite boy's funeral." "This isn't a funeral, Damon," Harrington's voice carried across the gathering. "It's a crime scene." Gasps rippled through the mourners. Security guards moved forward, but Harrington raised a hand. "I have a court order signed by Judge Morrison demanding the immediate examination of Chad Donovan's body based on credible evidence of foul play." He pulled out the document. "Anyone who interferes will be arrested for obstruction of justice." Damon's mask slipped. Pure hatred flashed across his face. This is a witch hunt. Whose delusional mind concorded such horror? "I'm not delusional." Sierra's voice rang out, surprising even herself. She stepped forward. "My name is Sierra Howard. 4 nights ago, I overheard you and Dr. Hayes in the hospital. I heard you plan to poison your brother, sign a false death certificate, and bury him while he was still alive so you could steal his company." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Damon laughed bitterly. "You expect people to believe I would murder my own brother? Based on what? The word of a stranger? Then let's open the casket," Harrington said calmly. "Right now, if Chad is truly dead, you have nothing to fear." An elderly woman in the front row spoke up, Eleanor Donovan, the boy's grandmother. "Marcus is right, Damon. If there's even a question, we must know. Open it." Damon looked trapped. "Fine," he said tightly. "Open it, and when you find my brother's body, I will sue you for everything you have." 4 pallbearers moved forward and slowly lifted the casket lid. Sierra's breath caught. Chad Donovan lay motionless, his skin waxy and pale. He looked dead, convincingly, absolutely dead. For a terrible moment, Sierra's certainty wavered. But then Harrington was beside the casket, his fingers on Chad's neck. There's a pulse, faint, but it's there. He looked up. This man is alive. Chaos erupted. Damon lunged forward, but security grabbed him. You're lying, he screamed. He's dead. Dr. Chen and his medical team rushed in with a gurney and emergency equipment. Dr. Chen worked with swift precision, checking vitals, administering oxygen. We need to counteract the paralytic now, he said. Harrington pulled the vial from his pocket and handed it over. Dr. Chen drew the antidote into a syringe and injected it directly into Chad's IV line. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Nothing happened, and Sierra felt her heart sinking. What if we're too late? And then Chad's chest moved, just a slightly deeper breath. His eyelids fluttered, his fingers twitched. Dr. Chen smiled. He's coming back. The crowd erupted in gasps and sobs. Sierra felt tears streaming down her face. Chad's eyes opened slowly, gray and unfocused. He stared up at the tent canopy, confusion evident in every line of his face. Then his gaze drifted sideways and landed on Sierra. His lips moved. No sound came out at first, but then, a whisper, hoarse and wondering. An angel? Sierra shook her head, a laugh bubbling up through the sobs. No, just a woman who couldn't mind her own business. Behind them, Damon Donovan collapsed to his knees. Police officers were already moving in to arrest him and Dr. Hayes. And Sierra knew with absolute certainty that she had just witnessed something extraordinary. The trial lasted 8 weeks. Damon and Dr. Hayes were convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sierra testified with unwavering clarity, and when the verdict was read, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. But throughout it all, the media circus, the legal proceedings, the endless questions, there was Chad, still breathing. He'd been recovering slowly, both physically and emotionally. The betrayal of his brother had shattered something in him, but so had Sierra's courage. He attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery, his eyes always finding hers. After the verdict, he found her on the courthouse steps. Thank you, he said simply. For my life. You're welcome, Sierra replied. They stood there, surrounded by chaos, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither could name. Can I take you to dinner? Chad asked. Not as a thank you, obviously not enough thanks. Just because I'd like to know you. Sierra smiled. I'd like that. Dinner turned into coffee. Coffee turned into long walks. Walks turned into late-night phone calls where they talked until dawn. Sierra learned that Chad was funny, curious, and surprisingly vulnerable. He made jokes about being the world's most expensive corpse, and asked her opinion on everything from business ethics to her favorite ice cream flavor. Chad learned that Sierra sang when she cooked, cried during dog commercials, and had a fierce integrity that made her incapable of backing down when something mattered. They fell for each other slowly, carefully, two people who'd met in the shadow of death and chosen to build something alive. 3 months after the trial, Chad took Sierra back to the mausoleum. It was sunset, the Pacific glowing beneath them. This is where I died, Chad said quietly, taking her hands. Where I first saw your face. Where I learned that the world still had people like you in it. Chad, I love you, Sierra Howard. The words came out in a rush. I know it's complicated. I know we started in the worst possible way. But I love you, not because you saved me, but because of who you are, your strength. Your heart, the way you see the world. He squeezed her hands. I love you because you're you. Sierra felt tears welling up. She'd been fighting this feeling, telling herself it wasn't real, that it couldn't last. But looking at Chad now, the setting sun painting him in gold, she knew the truth. I love you too, she whispered. I love you too. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and Sierra felt for the first time since that night in the hospital, like everything was exactly as it should be. 1 year later, life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. Sierra and Chad were building something real, a relationship based on trust, laughter, and the bone-deep knowledge that they'd both been willing to risk everything for each other. Chad had insisted Sierra move into his penthouse, though she'd kept her accounting job. I'm not a trophy girlfriend, she'd told him firmly. I need to be my own person. I wouldn't want you any other way, he'd replied, and meant it. Chad was different now, more open, more cautious about trust, but also more grateful for every day he had. But there was always a shadow they didn't discuss, a name that hung unspoken between them. It started with a phone call from Harrington. "Chad, we need to talk. Damon is being released." Sierra watched Chad's face go pale as he listened to the attorney's explanation. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "What happened?" she asked, though dread already pooled in her stomach. "Technicality. Some evidence was mishandled. The appeals court overturned part of his conviction." Chad's voice was hollow. "He'll be out in 3 weeks. Probation, restraining order, ankle monitor, but he'll be free." Sierra felt the room tilt. No, that's not possible. I'm so sorry." Chad pulled her close. "Harrington is fighting it, but the law is going to let a man who tried to bury you alive walk free?" Sierra's voice rose. "After everything? I know. Chad held her tighter. "But we'll be safe, we'll have security. He can't come within 500 feet of us." Sierra wanted to believe him, but she remembered Damon's face at the trial. Cold, calculating, unrepentant. Men like that don't forgive, they wait. Before we continue, if this story has touched your heart, if it's reminded you that love can bloom in the darkest places, and that courage looks like ordinary people making extraordinary choices, then subscribe and share it. Let someone else know that heroes don't wear capes. They wear hospital gowns and determination. Damon was released on a gray Thursday morning. The media covered it extensively, but Chad refused to comment. He simply increased their security and tried to act like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. The first incident happened 2 weeks later. Sierra came home from work to find a dead bird on their doorstep, its neck broken, arranged carefully with its wings spread. "It's probably just a coincidence," Chad said, but his voice was uncertain. The second incident was harder to dismiss. A brick through the window of Chad's office with a note attached. "Brothers are forever." "He's testing us," Harrington said when they showed him the note. "Seeing how far he can push before we react, but there's no proof it's him." "Who else would it be?" Sierra demanded. "That's what we need to prove." The breaking point came on a rainy evening 3 weeks after Damon's release. Sierra was working late at the office, finishing a quarterly report. The building was nearly empty, just security and a few workaholics like her. She'd called Chad 20 minutes earlier, their nightly ritual, just to hear his voice, to feel connected even when they were apart. "I miss you," she'd said, smiling as she typed on her laptop. "I'll be home in an hour. Maybe we can order that Thai food you love?" "I miss you more," Chad had replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "And yes to Thai food. Extra spring rolls for you, because I know you'll steal mine anyway." She'd laughed. "You know me too well." "Sierra, Hold on, baby," she'd interrupted, hearing footsteps in the hallway. "I think someone's here. Let me just..." She didn't hear the footsteps stop, didn't hear them change direction toward her office door. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her from her chair. The phone dropped from her hand, clattering onto the desk, the line still open. "Hello, Sierra," Damon's voice, cold calm, terrifyingly close to her ear. She tried to scream, but his hand was too tight. He dragged her toward the emergency exit, away from the security cameras. "You took everything from me," he hissed. "My freedom, my company, my brother. Did you really think I'd just let that go?" Chad heard everything. He heard the phone drop, heard Sierra's muffled scream, heard Damon's voice, that voice he'd grown up with, trusted, loved, now dripping with malice and murderous intent. "Sierra!" he shouted into the phone, already moving, his heart slamming against his ribs with such force he thought it might break through. "Sierra!" Only the sound of a struggle, a crash. Then Damon's voice again, distant but audible. "You should have stayed out of it." Chad was already running for the elevator, phone pressed to his ear with one hand, grabbing his keys with the other. His hands shook so badly he dropped the keys twice. Please, God, please, not her. Chad had never drove that fast in his life, but all he could think of was Sierra in danger. One hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white, and the other kept the phone to his ear, listening desperately for any sound, any indication that Sierra was still fighting, still alive. Through the phone, he heard Sierra's voice, stronger now. "Nature? You mean murder? Then Damon, I mean justice. Chad didn't deserve that company. Didn't deserve that life. And you're just another thing he took that he shouldn't have." Rage. Pure, incandescent rage flooded through Chad's system. His vision actually tinged red at the edges. The car lurched forward, weaving through traffic, but Chad barely noticed. All he could hear was the phone. And then Sierra's voice disappeared into a gurgling, choking sound that made his blood turn to ice. Chad had to end the call and dialed 911, his fingers fumbling over the numbers. "This is Chad Donovan. My girlfriend is being murdered at the Hancock Building, 1355 Market Street, 14th floor. The attacker is Damon Donovan. He's violating a restraining order. Send everyone." The 911 operator tried to ask questions, but Chad was already throwing the phone aside. 1 minute. He's off the phone for 1 full minute. How long could a person survive strangulation? 14 flights of stairs. He'd never moved so fast in his life, but he couldn't wait for the elevator. His dress shoes slipped on the concrete, and he went down on one knee at the 7th floor landing, catching himself with his hands. Blood from scraped palms left prints on the railing as he hauled himself up and kept going. Floor 14. Chad burst through the stairwell door and saw them immediately. Sierra was on the landing between floors. Damon crouched over her, his hands around her throat. Sierra's face was purple. Her eyes were half closed. Her hands had stopped clawing at Damon's grip. They just twitched weakly now. She was dying. No! The word tore out of Chad like something primal, inhuman. He covered the distance in seconds, grabbing Damon by the shoulders and ripping him away from Sierra with strength he didn't know he possessed. Damon flew backward, slamming into the concrete wall with a sickening crack. Chad didn't care. He dropped to his knees beside Sierra. "Baby, baby, look at me." His hands shook as he touched her face, her neck, checking for a pulse. There, faint, but there. "Breathe, Sierra. Come on, breathe for me." Her eyes fluttered open, beautiful, brown, and unfocused. The word came out as barely a whisper, her throat too damaged for more. "I'm here, I'm right here." Tears poured down his face as he cradled her head in his lap. "You're okay. You're going to be okay. I've got you." Behind him, Damon stirred, tried to stand. Chad heard it and turned, his expression absolutely murderous. "You don't touch her," Chad growled, his voice barely recognizable even to himself. "You don't even look at her. Do you understand me?" Damon laughed, a broken, terrible sound. "You've always been so weak, little brother, always letting your emotions control you. That's why you'll never—" Chad's fist connected with Damon's jaw before his brother could finish the sentence. He'd never hit anyone in his life, but in that moment, with Sierra's blood on his hands and her wheezing breaths filling his ears, he wanted to kill his own brother. He drew back for another punch, but Sierra's hand caught his arm. Weak, trembling, but enough to stop him. "Don't," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "Not worth it." The sound of sirens filled the stairwell. Police officers poured through the door, security guards behind them. Marcus appeared, helping to restrain Damon while officers handcuffed him, but Chad only had eyes for Sierra. "I heard everything," he whispered, gathering her into his arms as gently as if she were made of glass. "I heard him attack you, and I've never been so scared in my entire life. Sierra, I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I lost you." She touched his face with shaking fingers, wiping away his tears even as her own fell. "You saved me, Sierra, and now I can't live without you." Paramedics arrived, trying to get Chad to move so they could treat Sierra, but he wouldn't let go. Couldn't let go. They ended up working around him, checking her vitals, putting an oxygen mask over her face, while Chad held her hand and whispered every prayer he'd ever learned. "I love you," he said over and over. "I love you so much, you're going to be fine." "You have to be fine. I can't do this without you." Sierra squeezed his hand, weak but deliberate. Through the oxygen mask, her lips formed words he recognized. "I love you too." As they loaded her onto the gurney, as the paramedics wheeled her toward the ambulance, Chad walked beside her, refusing to let go of her hand. Behind them, police officers dragged Damon away, still laughing his terrible, broken laugh. But Chad didn't hear it, didn't care. All that mattered was Sierra, the woman who'd saved his life. The police handcuffed Damon as he continued to laugh, blood running from his split lip. "Violation of restraining order, attempted murder, again," one officer said grimly. "You're done, Donovan." And as the police took their statements, as the paramedics checked Sierra's injuries, as the reality of what had almost happened settled over them both, Sierra knew with absolute certainty that they'd survived the worst. Damon was going back to prison. This time there would be no technicalities, no appeals. Just the rest of his life behind bars, exactly where he belonged. 6 months later, Sierra, now married to Chad, stood in the dance studio she'd opened with Chad's support, a space for young girls from underprivileged backgrounds to find their strength through movement. Her neck still bore faint scars from Damon's attack, but she wore them like badges of honor. Proof that she'd survived. Proof that she'd fought. Damon was serving 3 consecutive life sentences now, with no possibility of parole. Ever. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. He would die in prison, and the world would be safer for it. Sierra had visited him once, against Chad's wishes. She'd needed to look him in the eye and tell him that he hadn't won. That his shadow didn't control her life, that she refused to spend her days looking over her shoulder. Damon had stared at her through the glass partition, and for just a moment, she'd seen something almost like regret in his eyes. "I hope you're happy," he'd said finally. "I am," Sierra had replied, "and that's what you'll never understand. You tried to take everything from us, but you only made us stronger." She'd walked out of that prison and never looked back. Now, watching her students dance, Sierra felt Chad's arms wrap around her from behind. "Happy?" he murmured. Unbelievably. He handed her a small box. Inside was a delicate necklace, a pendant in the shape of a phoenix rising from flames. "This is us," he said softly. "We died in that mausoleum, and we rose from the ashes. Stronger together." Sierra turned in his arms, tears in her eyes. "I love you. I love you too." Chad kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Gentle, reverent kisses that spoke of a love forged in fire and proven through trials. "Thank you for saving my life, Sierra Howard." "Thank you for making it worth living," she whispered back. They stood there, in the dance studio filled with music and hope and the promise of tomorrow. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something luminous. Because Sierra Howard had learned something profound in that hospital, in that mausoleum, in every moment of fear and triumph that followed. Love wasn't about perfect beginnings or easy paths. It was about choosing to fight every single day for the person who made your life extraordinary. And she would choose Chad Donovan, every time, in every way, for the rest of their beautiful, hard-won, absolutely remarkable life together. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.